So the next thing that we want to talk about, am I wasting my time, right? Am I wasting my time working so hard, right? Whereas it's all going to be throwaway. Yeah, I'm going to do a really good job, get a really good grade on this, but am I going to gain an experience and set of software classes maybe, which I can carry on with me to use it somewhere else? Well, my answer to this is, it all depends. It all depends. There are lots of things to consider here. But I think that the closer you stay to a standard design patterns, the more reusable those components will be, right? So it's possible to write code just like experimenting all the time without giving much thought about the structure. Why am I making this decision, right? Why am I creating 2 classes and not 3, right? Should they be connected or not? There are various aspects to consider, and simplicity is the key. The simpler your decisions are, the higher is the likelihood that you will be able to reuse components in the future. Ideally, what people do is that, and I can give you an example from maybe a financial industry, is that instead of writing an application to solve a particular problem, maybe you should first work on a financial engine, calculation engine, which solves set of problems based on the library of classes. And then based on that library, you can build multiple applications, which will include, to a certain degree, components from that library. In other words, to make things reusable, maybe you should think about a library of functions in C, a library of classes in C++, a library of classes in Java as well, so that you can make those things reusable. I would also suggest that, remember we talked about the portfolio thing. That portfolio thing is that something that you should also make presentable, right? You could demonstrate it to your potential employer, or you can show it to someone else, or maybe you can carry on with this idea to other projects and other ideas. So anyway, reusability is always my concern, right? And I will give you a very simple example of code reusability. Say I write code, and I should probably give you a more specific example. I don't know, let's just pick a specific system. Perhaps I wanted to put together a quiz, right? A quiz that asks like multiple choice questions, soliciting user, inputs, and computing the final grade, right? And so I'm writing this application, and perhaps I have more or less clear idea how to do something like that. So I'm thinking about questions and answers, accumulating total score, computing the number of questions I have in the quiz, computing some kind of average and whatever, right? And so I'm writing code to implement all of it, for example. And suddenly I catch myself copying and pasting code. It should be an immediate signal that that code should be a separate method in Java, separate function in C or C++, and likewise, separate procedure in your Visual Basic or JavaScript, whatever your implementation programming environment, programming language is, right? So essentially, there should be no duplication of code. If there is, for some reason, duplication of code, that should be a reusable part. And a reusable part could be simply, a small function or method in Java, which does some computation, implements a certain formula, for instance, takes a set of parameters, computes the average, and returns the result, does certain computation, right? But you should not copy and paste this formula in multiple places, changing the names of the variables all the time, right? That would be a wrong decision because it's so hard to maintain. What if your formula changes and you have to now search for every single place where you have to make a change, right? So relying on reusable functions in C or methods in Java is very important. Copy and paste is what we all do, but as programmers, we have to do this only when we do this in order to isolate that piece of code into a well understood, well described, and well designed function or method. Step number 2. Sometimes functions and methods really work together well. So therefore, there should be a class or structure in C that groups functions and data. Again, in C++, functions and data. In Java, data and methods, right? Function in C and method in Java are the same description of the same thing, right? So you can group them together and make a meaningful class. For instance, in that quiz application where I have questions and answer, perhaps question could be a class and answer could be a class, right? So, and therefore, I can have a set of operations associated with user answer, like for instance, collecting user answer, analyzing whether it's correct or not, somehow remembering the result, and contributing to some kind of running total, whatever, right? So it could be all responsibility of the answer class, whereas the question class could be responsible for displaying the user interface, organizing everything and on screen, and mostly be responsible for some sort of like a presentational aspect of the actual question, right? So there should probably be another class named quiz, which essentially will collect a set of questions from the pool of available questions and somehow randomize them so that the user can see like a random sequence of these individual questions. Something that you're all familiar with, but that's the thinking, as opposed to just writing code to make sure it works, right? All the time, I will tell you, I spend more time stepping back and rearranging what the code that I've written differently, as opposed to just keep writing code until the problem is solved. This is the wrong direction. Okay, so that's something to say about implementation, and unfortunately, I have to be realistic here with you when we're talking about reusability, right? Reusability. Where's my drawing? Right here. How to make things reusable and how much you expect things to be reusable. Unfortunately, sometimes, even when your expectation is high, sometimes making things reusable can be tough. However, lots of it can be taken over to a different project and quickly modified because you understand what the functionality is. You understand what the purpose is of that specific part, one or the other, right? So in my world, for example, I have to deal with parsing a lot of text. For instance, here's a web page, and in my challenge is to actually break it down to individual gadgets present in HTML form, input form, for instance, right? So I need to write code which parses HTML and understands its structure. So I've done it once, and guess what? Tomorrow I would like to write a program that wants to understand a source file with Java code. Am I going to be able to reuse everything from my parser that was able to understand HTML web page? Probably not. But guess what? The structure of that parser should probably be fairly the same. The approach is the same. Your source file is just a sequence of characters. It has certain tokens. Those tokens represent something. So as you begin to understand and parse individual tokens, you should be collecting information in some kind of, what they call abstract syntax tree, which represents the structure of the document you're trying to understand. And then once you parse the source and organize it into some kind of structure in memory, then your second your second step in that process is basically now what you do with this information, right? For instance, you could convert a C program into a Java program, right? Or you can take HTML web page and convert it to a plain text. To give you an example, why would you want to parse something like that, right? And then you can convert text to a C program that prints that text, right? So there are lots of things that can be done with just parsing inputs. And again, you should probably not start from scratch when you move on from one challenge to another, right? So your ideas are highly reusable. Will I be able to copy and paste again from the parser that understands HTML to the parser that understands C? Yes. Probably 50% of it should be reusable, but then tweaked to specifically deal with the grammar of C as opposed to grammar of HTML, right? So reusability is very attractive. We all should be really attractive to it. This is something that is very noble noble direction for us to move. But reality is that almost never things are reusable 100%, unless you're adding components to standard library, right? If you have a list type of container, it can be reusable in almost every single project that you're working with, right? So if you came up, say, that there are, like libraries or components of standard libraries in every programming language that deal with strings, that deal with text, right? So, and you came up with some new idea, perhaps you want to deal with like some kind of immutable constant text all the time, and you want to optimize it. Well, just write that code, and guess what? Yes, it's going to be 100% reusable. You will be able to carry it over to every single project because it's so universal, so uniform. It just works. It does exactly what it's supposed to do, right? But in more like user-oriented applications, such as this, elevator traffic control system, or a railroad traffic control system, or aviation industry, application, whatever, right? You should be able to reuse some parts of your code, but realistically, not all of it will be just copy and paste or copy files from one source to another, right?